it the cook, the thief, his wife, and her lover. The scary woman with legs out to here is invariably French, and the devil always has a French accent. No wonder we perceive the Frenchwoman as slightly wicked. Her passions are our provocations. We love her and we hate her because she seems to be everything that we're not, and because her way of being contradicts our cultural judgments and moral prejudices about love and sex. Plus, we're sure that she's got secrets. It seems she grew up steeped in sensuality while we were raised on canned heat. She certainly seems to know more about giving and receiving pleasure, which means that she's probably having more guilt-free sex than we are, and eating a lot more pastry, too. Like many Americans, I first traveled to France as a student backpacker. A few years later, I returned, enrolled myself in the Sorbonne, and moved into a converted broom closet in the posh but gloomy 16th arrondissement with a roommate named Solange. Solange was from Alsace. She was pale with straw-colored hair and reminded me of a garden elf. Despite this cherubic quality, she had a severity about her that evoked the rustic plains of her ancestral northern Europe. At least, that's how I perceived her penchant for frugality. She ate cheese to the rind, then dried it and grated it into her soup. Similar rituals were performed with dried half-eaten baguettes. She was reserved, rarely gesticulated, and had 3 articles of clothing that she wore over and over again with only tiny adjustments to each look. In short, though Solange was no va-va-voom French girl, she did, despite her curiosities, have a certain undeniable charm and sex appeal. And I recall thinking that if she were a typical French girl, I'd have to adjust my cultural assumptions. I was already aware that the proverbial je ne sais quoi we Anglo-Saxons associate with French women did not have as much to do with surface detail as one might surmise. Yes, we know the Normans conquered the Anglo-Saxons centuries ago and nobody speaks like Beowulf anymore. I use the term Anglo-Saxon or Anglo as a multi-purpose generic for American and British-flavored cultures and for those raised on similar soil. To linguistic purists bothered by this liberty, mea culpa. During my séjour at the Sorbonne, I read many nouveaux romans, wore many scarves, and through my daily encounters with the natives, nurtured my own vigorous love-hate relationship with the French. A thick, delicious year passed, and upon my return to California, I assumed that my French days were over. They were not. Years later, I met a man working on a film in Los Angeles. I immediately knew that he was French because he was eating a hamburger with a fork. We courted, and I moved back to France again, where I married, had 2 children, and continued to study the local flora and fauna up close. This time I lived in the northeastern fringe of the city's right bank, in the 19th arrondissement, a raggedy but rapidly gentrifying working-class swatch of northeastern Paris that I call People's Paris, for the sheer density of humanity packed into it from every corner of the world. A Parisian friend of mine once sniffed, "I need a passport to enter your neighborhood." At the time, his incurable snobism deeply impressed me. It's certainly a reminder that if France is the Eiffel Tower, it's also the Tower of Babel, and that goes for everything beyond the dense supernova of the city's capital as well. Be that as it may, when I first moved to the 19th, you couldn't find it on the maps of many guidebooks. It seemed as if their guidebook writers had laid a cookie cutter on the center of Paris, trimmed off the edges, and discarded them. Only a few landmarks scattered in these northern fringes were mentioned: the Père-Lachaise Cemetery, Montmartre. Otherwise, the only real Paris that seemed to exist to purveyors of all things French was its center, namely, the left bank. I bring this up to make a point, which is this. Most of the enduring stereotypes we nurture about French women are exported from this center, where so many cultural scribes and tourists stake their claim. It's through the prism of this gilded old hub in arrondissements nestled around the Seine that we find our most enduring French cliché. You know her. She's la Parisienne, that slightly haughty Frenchie with no body fat who strolls down the Boulevard Saint-Germain looking très chic and who embodies the word sexy like no other. Disclaimer. I use the word sexy throughout this book, well aware that it's among the most overused word on the planet. Hackneyed, blitzed out, postcoital, and postmodern, sexy is exhausted by the truly polymorphously perverse weight of its own significance. The left bank Parisienne, however, is not representative of all French women any more than Paris represents all of France, and you don't have to visit the country's 95 departments to get wind of this. Just leave the beaten path of the city center, more a testimony to the city's glory.